Hello, everyone, and welcome to another incredible episode of The Lion's Den. I'm your host, Venezia Leone, and today I sat down with James Bates, CEO and founder of AdviNOW Medical. James has built and scaled multiple companies, including AdviNOW, which he grew from zero to millions in revenue by applying AI inside one of the most regulated industries in the world, healthcare. Before that, he ran a billion-dollar self-driving vehicle technology business, giving him a unique perspective on scaling deep tech at real scale. In this episode, we talk about how a non-compete after selling his autonomous vehicle company unexpectedly pushed James into healthcare, and how his discovery that doctors spend the majority of their time, about 70%, on paperwork instead of practicing medicine became the foundation for AdviNOW. We dive into what it really takes to build AI in regulated environments, how incentive structures shape outcomes, and the resilience required to scale through pivots, including the pandemic. James also shares why focus and discipline are the real separators between success and failure for founders. It's a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey, James, so excited to have you on the Lion's Den.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to dive into your origin story a little bit. You've built multiple companies from the ground up, including your current company, AdviNOW Medical, which has scaled from, zero to millions in revenue. Take us back to the beginning. What problem were you originally trying to solve?
Yeah, I'll start by talking a little bit about myself and how the AdviNOW story came about. I've been in the high technology field for 30 years. Most recently, before AdviNOW, I ran a billion-dollar business in self-driving vehicle technologies. We made the technologies that, quite frankly, 80% of the world that has auto brake and auto steer was using us. We, Tesla, Google Waymo, you can go down the list. Mm-hmm. AdviNOW was not even a thought at that time, but we sold the business. And as an officer of the company, it was a great time for me to retire. So I retired, had an extremely strict non-compete. And that meant that I had to figure something else out to do, the type of non-compete, which is you can do anything you want in this world, as long as it's something you've never done before type of thing. Well, healthcare was different. And so I started looking at healthcare and digging into it. And originally I was thinking that I would be a mini private equity guy, maybe buy up some medical practices and learn healthcare that way. I got with a banker and we started looking at medical practices that were on the market. The more I looked, the more I was surprised at really what terrible businesses medical practices are. They have very low margins, don't make a lot of money. The doctor may do okay, but the rest of the practice as a business, there's not much value there. So as a mainly financial buyer at the time, I couldn't bring myself to write a check and buy a group of medical practices if they're not profitable. So from that standpoint, I decided it wasn't going to work. I wasn't going to actually buy some medical practices. But through that process, I became good friends with a guy who ran a chain of urgent care / primary care. And he asked me to help him fix it. Well, not knowing anything about healthcare, I decided that I would dive in and basically start with a Six Sigma Lean analysis of the business. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Six Sigma Lean means, essentially what it means is you do a very detailed cost analysis, you do a time and motion study, and you measure the movements that every single person makes in the widget creation. In this example, widget is the medical encounter. And then you correlate every single cost line item to an outcome you're trying to achieve. In medical practices, the outcome you're trying to achieve is to give the patient positive outcomes, right? That's important. But number two is the doctor wants to get paid at the appropriate level for treating the patient. And number three, you don't want to get sued for doing it, right? So you essentially have three outcomes: positive outcomes for the patient, getting paid, and not getting sued. Well, the results of that time and motion study showed that physicians were spending 70% of their time trying to get paid and not get sued, and only 30% of their time practicing medicine. Wow. And that's when I realized the fundamental problem of healthcare is not that we have some massive shortage of doctors. It's not that we have some massive, flaw in our healthcare system. It's that physicians are 70% of their time is wasted. So I decided that, hey, you could use artificial intelligence to completely automate that 70% of the time. Thus, AdviNOW Medical today, our tagline is, we completely automate the practice so doctors can be doctors once again. We want them spending 100% of their time practicing medicine and 0% of their time worried about getting paid and not getting sued. That's the AI's job.
Absolutely. And I feel like because this AdviNOW is a decade old, were you kind of ahead of the game on AI? Like, were you kind of at the forefront of, oh, let's actually integrate AI into a regulated industry, or no?
Yeah, I mean, we were AI before AI was cool, right? So we were doing this long before anyone else. That's why we're able to get the fundamental patents that we have. Ultimately, the rest of the world kind of started to catch up in 2021, 2022, when OpenAI started announcing all of their large language models. And ChatGPT became a household name. But before that time, we were speaking a language that almost nobody understood, but they saw the results, and that's what matters. And so going into a regulated environment means, of course, that you have to really understand not only the FDA regulations, but all of the legal privacy, HIPAA, the privacy type of aspects that are in healthcare that are unique to the healthcare industry. Then you have to look at this because government payers are involved. There's massive amounts of regulation around how doctors get paid, who makes the decision, who codes what, and exactly what the AI does and what the AI doesn't do. And so from that standpoint, it took a little bit of learning to understand the liability in the payer framework. But once you understood it, there's a clear delineation. It's highly regulated around that 30% of doctors practicing medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But getting paid and not getting sued, a lot less regulated there. Still regulations, just not as severe as the getting paid, not getting sued, because you're not really dealing with the FDA at that point.
Yeah, that's more of the paperwork and the follow-ups and the things that AI is actually very good at consolidating and doing for you.
Automating the workflows.
Exactly. Sure. So were there differences in how you operated as a founder, at the beginning of this company versus maybe how you had been operating as a founder at the end of your, autonomous vehicle technology company? Like, what were some of those early challenges that forced you to change?
Well, I mean, ultimately, if you're running $1 billion business, and then you have people that do everything for you and you're essentially making decisions, you're less of an individual contributor.
Mm-hmm.
The problem we have now, when you're a startup, is that you do everything. You're a company of one. And so extremely different worlds for people who have never really founded a company and especially put their own money into it. And I put 10 million of my own dollars into this company. It's very hard for them to comprehend what it means to do everything, be responsible for everything. And ultimately, when you have a team of staff, be responsible to be able to pay their paycheck every month. And that is, forces a humility that I don't think you get in large companies for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I've spent a lot of my career in startups, and there's definitely that, oh, everybody wears many hats, adage that's always thrown around. And I think until you're really in it, do you realize at the end of the day, like, wow, I really did 10 different tasks that typically 10 different people might do in a larger scale organization.
For sure.
So was there anything that you didn't appreciate or really understand about building a company in a regulated industry like healthcare before you start? I mean, I'm sure there's a million things you didn't know before you started, but anything that comes to mind as kind of a big gotcha that once you learned and understood, it kind of unlocked for you the ability to be successful in this kind of space?
Well, I think the whole incentive system of healthcare is very different than the incentive system anywhere else, and it's less about being regulated and more about, well, the regulations kind of drive it, I suppose, but the incentive systems are pretty messed up. And so if you think about a hospital system, does a hospital system get compensated if the patient gets better quickly? No. In fact, they get penalized financially.
Yeah.
leave the hospital, they don't come back. From a revenue standpoint, the incentive system for a hospital system is to make the patients as sick as long as possible. Now, that's kind of a evil view of the problem. But from a pure financial standpoint, that is a reality. Insurance companies, because of the ACA, have really, really weird compensation. So they cannot make profit above a certain level. The ACA does not allow those insurance companies to make profit. So if they actually become efficient and make too much money, they have to give money back. So they have a maximum 20% profit margin that they can make. And so many times they have it, if they lower their revenue because they cut costs, then all of a sudden they get penalized with less total dollars of profit. So for them, the higher the premiums, the better. Now, if that weird kind of system wasn't there, then they could make 50%, gross margin on a certain plan, and they would try to drive everyone to that plan regardless of what the premiums were, right? So you get people off of high cost plans, we get them in low cost plans, you end up making more profit. That's better. That's the way incentive systems are supposed to work. Yeah. But because of the Affordable Care Act, that whole incentive system is broken. So the only way insurance companies make more money is if premiums go up. Thus, you've seen since the ACA passed, premiums just continue to go up because that's the only way. There's zero incentive for them to cut premiums. In fact, there's negative incentives for them to cut premiums. And so as I started learning really the financial incentives, and in every organization, people aren't evil, right? They're not out trying to do malicious stuff. But the reality is when you're compensated for getting a P&L to look good, then you create systems to do that. And so you end up with large insurance companies will buy medical practices, and then they'll pay their doctors and medical practices more. So those end up being losses on the insurance statement so that they can make more money, and they make more money in the practices that they own rather than on the insurance side, because those are the games you got to play because of the weird incentives that the law has created. So once I learned and understood that, then I had to develop my system such that nobody's motivations were hurt. Everybody wins. So how do you make sure the doctor wins, the insurance company wins, and the hospital system wins? Well, you eliminate the overhead of the way our system works. And when you do that, insurance companies will only be billed for what the patient absolutely needs. Hospital systems will get the money faster, and doctors will get paid more because they'll be able to see more patients. And that is the beauty of our system, is that all of the stakeholders in a weird incentivized system actually win.
Sounds pretty easy.
Yeah. Once you kind of know the game.
So do you feel like the payment speed, it was one of the biggest unlocks that you guys were providing to this ecosystem? It was really, once you could reduce all of the back and forths and time, then people were able to respond faster?
Well, there's multiple things. I mean, so obviously making a physician more efficient is important. And the back and forth with the insurance company is really what's called a revenue cycle management company. So it's the RCM on the back end. So it's less of the physician's time. The physician is made faster because the AI is collecting all the data in the right way. And the physician's getting paid more because they're populating getting the data and putting that in the medical record that the insurance company requires to pay at a certain level.
Okay, so you would, sorry, go ahead.
So our whole system is driven by what the insurance company requires, because once we meet that guideline, then them denying claims goes down dramatically. And then when you get an audit, them clawing back money goes down, nearly eliminated. And so really it's learning what the insurance companies want, at the same time what the patient needs and the doctor needs and what the lawyers are worried about, so you don't get sued. We haven't talked about that whole game going on too. And it's all about data collection and documentation. So the actual practicing medicine part is what the doctors went to medical school. and to do, and that's not what they do. They think, what does the insurance company want for patient A? I better get it. What does a lawyer want for patient B? I better get that.
Yeah.
Instead of, what does the patient actually need to be cured? Right. And they're unfortunately not the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So that's more of, I understand, like, yeah, fitting what they're trying to do, which is medicine, into the boxes of the system that has been prescribed by these other entities. Okay.
Yes.
So as a multiple time entrepreneur, are there lessons from building AI in a regulated environment that you would apply to like any scaling business now that you've been through it?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing that I've learned, and it's not just the fact that it's regulated, but regulated definitely emphasizes this. You really need to do a detailed time and motion study to learn what you want to automate. And then from a regulatory perspective, what can be automated? Where does the human in the middle need to be? And then from a data protection standpoint, what has privacy restrictions on it? What doesn't? I mean, if you don't start with that analysis, you're going to be wasting a lot of money doing things that aren't going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's something that in product management they talk about a lot, is staying in the problem space for as long as you can before you jump into the solution space. And it sounds like you're echoing that in saying, develop a deep and thorough understanding of exactly what problem you're trying to solve and the constraints around that before you just dive in and throw AI at something and try to solve it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about your mindset as a founder and CEO. You've said that focus and discipline separate success from failure. How did your definition of focus change as we talked about, as the company scaled and, you had to focus on, I'm doing everything and trying to get the first customer, to how do I, scale this exponentially?
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, as any responsibility in a position grows, the delegation aspect it comes. But what I meant by focus is it's very easy to get distracted by the naysayers in the early days. Then it's very easy to get distracted by everyone who tells you you're wonderful in the high growth days. Because ultimately neither are true, right? And so you have to be very narrowly focused, almost a little bit of blinders on, as you're creating the solution, delivering it, and then really listen to the users of the product, putting yourself in their shoes. And that type of focus, although it sounds easy, it's really not easy. And so once you do that, then you have to be a workaholic about it, right? You have to be able to put in the work, because ultimately everyone's going to be telling you why it can't be done, and probability says it can't be done. And then you're going to have to overcome all those difficulties in an environment that is not really that forgiving. So that's what I meant by that diligence and focus.
Yeah. And what about the amount of stakeholders that it sounds like you are kind of building for? It sounds like your kind of end user is the doctor, and that's where the mission comes from and the focus. But how have you navigated having, an insurance company that's involved, and a hospital who might actually be paying you, but a doctor who's using it, and all of that? Like, have you had to overcome challenges in that regard?
I mean, of course. So there's the personas of all of the different users, and you have a number of different customers, even though only one of them is paying you. As an example, the patient doesn't pay me directly, but if the patient doesn't like my platform, they'll take it out on the medical practice, which is the one that's paying me. And so I need to make sure the patient is happy. At the same time, the physician, maybe they're working for a practice. The practice is the one that's paying me, but the physician starts complaining about my software. They won't be paying me for very long. So the physician is my customer. but also the revenue cycle management component, the insurance company, whether they pay the claims, they're also my customer. Because if I don't give them exactly what they're expecting, then I don't get the results of the increased revenue, increased profitability for the practice that is what we're known for. So we have so many different stakeholders that have to be happy. Really, it's balancing all of them such that we can deliver the type of ROI that we've been able to do.
Yeah. I think that the balance of it's just an interesting space, because I think in a lot of startups, you have somebody who has an end user. I am fixing a house. I am, providing software as a service. Like, it's kind of a very clear end user. But in what you're describing, it sounds like there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, exactly what you said, who all kind of have an opinion on the efficacy of what you guys are building.
Yeah, it's complex for sure.
Absolutely. So I want to think about kind of the future a little bit. I guess kind of reflecting on the future. So what are some maybe hard lessons that ended up becoming long-term advantages, or ended up, getting woven into the fabric of the business? So maybe something, at the beginning that you really had to overcome, or that stopped your growth, or that kept you up at night, that now, you can look back on and you've learned from, or you've maybe started to integrate those lessons into your day-to-day.
Well, the pandemic was a very big difficulty for me. So we released our product very shortly before the pandemic. And our number one clients that wanted to use it were in what's called retail medicine. So you can think of the CVS Minute clinics, or the clinics in your grocery store next to Safeway or Walmart, where medical practices are mixed together with a grocery store or a pharmacy or things like that. And it was very much the rage pre-pandemic. And so we designed our solution narrowly around that market such that it would be very successful. Well, we got lots of good business and we were ramping up. When the pandemic hit, the first thing the grocery stores do is shut down the medical practice. They're like, we don't want sick people in our stores, sick people bad. In fact, the clinic can't even be in the parking lot. We're just shutting it down. We don't need it. Yeah. And that really hurt us. I mean, it was rough. So from an AdviNOW standpoint, we had to pivot from a market, because that market essentially disappeared because of the pandemic, completely outside of our control. So we pivoted to hospital systems, but hospital systems don't grow revenue very quickly either. And they require a much more comprehensive product than just the urgent care type of product that we delivered to the market first. It has to be comprehensive into any medical practice. And then you expand that out even further, to any medical specialty. We really had to focus to make sure that product was robust. And it made us stretch. It was very, very tough to go through that, because we didn't have the revenue initially that we thought we were going to have to be able to make that investment. So it took raising more money. It took a lot more effort than I initially had anticipated. So very challenging, but AdviNOW today is much better for it, because we are the only solution on the market that is specialty agnostic, completely automates the medical practice, and gives those type of deliveries from anywhere from a large hospital system all the way down to a single practitioner pediatrics practice.
Yeah. So if you were starting again today, as you were describing that, in my mind, I was thinking about, okay, is the lesson from that, when you're launching something new, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Have a diversified approach. Or is the lesson from that, become a very specialized, sort of specific expert on something that no one else has, right? And then kind of expand out from there. So if you were to go back there, would you do anything differently in that first year?
I mean, given the data that we had, I mean, no one could predict the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And so I don't think I would do anything differently. Maybe I would have invested more to execute faster, so we would have been in high volume production before the pandemic, because maybe that could have helped change the decision mindset of the retail outlets, because if it's completely automated, you don't need people, maybe you could still see COVID patients. and have it be less of a risk. Or maybe that wouldn't have made a difference. I don't know. I mean, and so
Yeah.
I've gone back and thought, hey, if I was to do this all again, would I have delivered the whole product just to retail medicine? And given all the data that I had, I mean, that was our quick ramp to revenue. That would have been the fast exit for the company.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would have changed anything. But what you do need to be is nimble, because when something like that happens, most companies just die. And we were able to pivot to essentially deliver something much better.
Yeah. Is there anything else on that you'd say for a founder who might be in the middle of trying to scale and things got messy unexpectedly? In addition to
Don't be embarrassed of a pivot. I would say that no large successful company has never pivoted. So it may seem like a fail. I mean, for me, I was very embarrassed. We're like, hey, we're going after urgent care. We're ramping up. 27 clinics were live, and then it went to 0 overnight. And then we kind of gave up on that space and went over to the large hospital space. Didn't really give up on it. It's just that space died, never really recovered. And so to me, it was like, we're ramping revenue went to 0, then we had to recover. It's kind of a embarrassing story, because it's like, wait a minute, my plan failed. But
yeah,
no plan is going to be perfect. You can't predict the future. You sure can't predict the pandemic, but there's a lot of other things you can't predict. You just have to be nimble enough and flexible enough, and quite frankly, humble enough to be able to make that transition without getting too distracted.
Keeping that focus.
Exactly.
Okay. So it sounds like you are able to maintain that focus, and you keep coming back to startups and all of that. Like, what helps you? Maybe a two-parter. What is convincing to you that this career path of entrepreneurship is worth it? And then maybe the second part is, what do you do to keep yourself motivated to stay in this kind of career path?
Well, is it worth it? I don't know. If you ask my wife, I'm not sure she would say it's worth it. But the reality is, when somebody looks at a successful entrepreneur and they see them after they're successful, everyone says, man, I wish I was that guy. But so few people are willing to do what it takes. I mean, 7 days a week, literally 18 hours a day for years, with everyone telling you that it's going to be work and you're stupid and it's not going to make it. I mean, it takes a special kind of individual who's okay with pain, really, to choose that route. And so I'm not sure that it's for everyone. In fact, I know it's not for everyone. And so there's a lot of people that want to go to a job, get a paycheck, and come home and have something reliable. That's definitely not entrepreneurship. So if you want to become the Elon Musks of the world, or if you hate Elon because of his politics, you can choose any other entrepreneur, Steve Jobs or whoever you like. If you want to be that guy, they put it all on the line multiple times. And they were willing to completely fail and start over. And they were willing to work 18-hour days, 7 days a week for years and be okay with it. And so, I'm not sure that that it is the alluring profession that everyone thinks it is. But at the same time, I completely enjoy it and I love it, right? I wouldn't want to do anything else. I want to, I'm somewhat, like to be my own boss type of thing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm not my own boss because I have investors and I have a board, So it's really a learned love that you have to go through to really understand what it means.
Yeah. I definitely I think 18-year-old me was a little bit more excited about entrepreneurship than, 30-year-old me kind of thing, You're like, oh, I can do it. I got all the energy in the world. And then you get there and you're
Anybody
like,
can do it.
it's pretty good to close my computer at 5 p.m. Let me tell you.
It's amazing how that works.
It is. Okay. So lastly, where do you have any comments on kind of where AI and healthcare is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years? Anything that, the listeners should kind of be looking out for, anything that you're excited about, any trends, anything like that?
Yeah, so AI in healthcare right now, the really big focus is automating all the workflows. Taking a doctor, allowing that doctor to see 50% more patients per day, but having them work less hours, allowing the doctor to be a doctor once again. And that's what companies like mine are doing. But at the same time we're doing that, we're actually building a data infrastructure that will allow a doctor to function as a physician assistant in the future, get FDA approval, be software as a medical device, that whole regulated environment that I said we were avoiding. We can actually go into, get that FDA approval, and then work underneath a physician's license. And what that means is in the future, patients will, log into their phone, the AI will diagnose them, and then they'll say, yeah, give me this. I choose this treatment that the AI is giving them. The drug will be shipped to their house, or they get the antibiotic, go to the pharmacy, or however they want it to work. But ultimately, that process is what is enabling the expansion of healthcare and the reach of healthcare to every single person in the world, essentially. Diagnosis will be free. It's never free, but in the US, it'll be underneath the physician, so you'll still be paying something. But in a third world country, it's the cost of the servers. So ultimately, the cost becomes whatever the treatment is. The diagnosis is free. The treatment will cost money. And that's where healthcare will go. I'm pretty excited. 5 to 10 years out still. I mean, that's not going to happen tomorrow, even though everyone puts in ChatGPT and says, oh, I hurt my leg. And it says, you've got cancer. But, it's getting a lot better, but it will get there eventually to the point where a doctor will just be auditing what the AI does. A human doctor will audit what the AI does. And that's the future that's coming.
It's awesome. Yeah, I've heard that certain disciplines also have like larger success. So something like radiology, where you're like looking for a visual overlay to a norm, there's ways that we can already apply this really, really, really accurately today. So how cool will it be when that technology just keeps getting better and better?
Yeah, well, in the radiology world, which is super easy because it's machine vision. Well, not super easy, but super defined, right? You know what the images are. They're working. It's an AI underneath the physician's license, so the physician still has to sign off on what the AI is finding.
Yeah,
and so that's kind of where the rest of medicine will be.
Awesome. Well, James, it was such a pleasure to have you, and really enjoyed, learning all about the industry and your journey.
Well, Vanessa, I appreciate your time on the podcast, and looking forward to talking with you again.